Okay, so there, and I should have said this earlier if I didn't. Hang on. These are really repeating each other, these trees back here. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I had a bit of trouble on that the
In
other
what
day,
way?
but I think it was just fixing the colors a bit.
Yeah, but I'm just
Last
talking
time.
about the shape. It's exact same shape, repeating the exact same distance from each other. I would throw a smaller washy thing that looks like it's sitting a little further back and maybe cluster 2 or 3, and that way it'll break it up back there. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And all you gotta do is just put
Yeah,
a silhouette in there. It's not, and a little lighter than the other ones. Go ahead. What were you gonna say?
well, I just said about like fixing the colors a bit. I think you mentioned that, if I can remember right.
The colors feel really saturated to me. Yeah.
uh, yeah, I guess so.
Here's the other thing. You've sort of got, and this is all common stuff. Hang on. Sort of, it's the same green everywhere, more or less, right?
I was trying to not make it the same, but
One
just
thing you
keeps
can
on
do,
turning out.
okay, so one thing you can do is when you wash this stuff in, you can kind of, like we talked about, you could dampen up the paper a little bit. And then I might go, okay, so whatever green this is, which feels a little out of the tubey to me, then I might go in and go, I'm gonna mix a green with some yellow ochre and maybe cobalt blue. Okay. And that's automatically going to take me out of the having the same green. Or I might go, I'm going to go in and do a little cad yellow and ultramarine blue, and then I might knock it down a little bit because I'll go, oh, that's a little too strong. I'll knock it down a little bit. By using different color mixes and things, you're automatically going to get different temperatures and things. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So that will help you. And then down here, like if I was washing this all, like let's say the ground in this, while I have, I probably dampen all of this, and then that way this line won't exist here, and it'll be a soft transition into the foliage. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get that also.
And then probably get some, let's grab this, hang on. Oh, and another thing I want to do today, I want to go over what we're going to start. Does that make sense? Because we're pulling out of this thing now. I'm going to give you a drawing for that, so it'll be much quicker. I want to get through this next one fairly quickly.
Okay.
I would really suggest if you either don't have a lot of experience with acrylic or no experience with acrylic, might be better for you to go apples to apples, because I have a 4.5 hour video, whatever, on this, the whole process, right? And I'll talk about it in class too. It might be easier for you to go apples to apples with an initial pass on it, right? Because most of the time when I had people and they go, because at this point now it's just like, hey, you can grab a different drawing. I don't care about that. But it's like, are you going to know how to interpret it? Does that make sense?
Yes.
And, if you have a little more painting experience, that could be fine. I had one person so far pull off a different drawing. Everybody else kind of failed, so now I'm kind of going, let's just keep this pure paint mechanics now. Okay. This one you had to do a lot of thinking on, a lot of drawing on, because I wanted to go through that process, but now that process, so I'm cutting that part off of it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So, and acrylic, again, to me, it's not just about acrylic. We just started, I stair step these in this way for a reason. You're going watercolor, which is a totally washing medium, to going to acrylic, which is also a water media. Well, all three of them are water media, where you're still going in very loose and transparent and washy, but then you're starting to build up to opacity. So we're taking the watercolor idea in the beginning and then building up the opacity. And then with gouache, it's the same thing, but you have added problems or added issues there because gouache can reactivate. So then we have to talk about and there's a lot of technique around gouache, okay? There's a lot of technique around all this stuff. Does that make sense?
Yes.
But I think if you just break it down, just like with and then the idea of how we're handling these washes can also apply to acrylic, can also apply to gouache, can also even apply to oil. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So let me grab this brush. no, here, there it is. So in here, let's just go and try and, like, I might, I'm going to play with this temperature a little bit on the greens. Let's try this first. Okay, number one, where's your light coming from? Is it upper left? Yeah, it'd have to be upper left.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, so you need to start modeling this form a little bit. So we can come in here, we'd mix, we could take that green and knock a little red into it and knock it down a little bit and start to get some values that are shaping out some of this anatomy a little bit. One thing I like to do, like on a round surface right there, is I might be able to get a little bit of a core shadow in there. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And then I could probably reflect a little of this warmth in here, and that's just automatically going to start to sparkle it up a little bit because we're introducing another color. We're introducing bounce light. So all that thing is going to bring everything together into the same lighting, right?
Yeah.
And I could do it here a little bit. I could even go, so I can get a little bit of warmth in there. And then we go back to this darker value. So I'm going to start coming in here and modeling out some of the, maybe there's a little shadow of the horn casting onto his body right there. So I get a little bit of dark there. Here in the eyes, I'm probably going to come in here and just get a little bit of a gray value or something like that. And just put, that's a little too much, but that's fine for now. Because, you even do it with humans where you put a little bit of right below the eyelid, you'll put just an almost imperceptible little shadow value in there, depending on what the lighting is. It could be cooler, it could be warmer, it could be grayish. And it just gives that a little bit of pop. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then here, okay, so then at some point you might want to go, now so what I look for is opportunities to give things form, to give things secondary color, to give things bounce light, all that stuff. So one thing I look at, I go right here, this is a horn. So I should be able to go in here. And let's say I'll just take this value. There's a couple things I can do here. Hang on. I'll take this value, I'll knock it down. I have an interesting thing to tell you, Elizabeth, but I can't do it in class. So this has a little bit, I don't like that color. Hang on, it's too muddy. I'm going to go to this value or this color and knock that down a little bit. And I want to make sure I keep color in this. And then I can put a little bit of a core. This thing is basically a cylinder, right?
Yeah, it is.
Say that again?
It is.
So it'll start to turn this a little bit, right? And again, I'd make sure I keep some color in it. Right now, I'm not really happy with the color. It's too gray. But for now, and then I can go, all right, so what's down here? There's some green down here. Maybe I can bounce a little of the green in there. Maybe just there where it's close. And see how it starts to read a little more?
Yes, yeah.
So that's this. Have you had basic drawing?
Me?
Huh? Yeah.
Wait, I don't think so.
You know if you took it. Okay, so one of the things you do in basic drawing is you draw these cylinders and stuff. This is why. Okay. And again, I can come in over here. And by the way, now that you have this color down, what is this? Oh, okay. Now that you have this color down, you might need to go in with and mix a little white gouache in there to kind of go in and cover it a little bit. Okay.
Okay.
Which is a nice thing with this because you don't need to buy a whole set of gouache. You can just use, I'm going to put a little green bounce in there. This needs to get a little darker. Still not happy with my core, but I just want to make sure I get it across to you. I think that core is a little too gray. Now, here's another thing I might do. So let's go, wait, let's go here. Let me get that. Oops. I'd probably get a little bit of a cool highlight in there. And then I'd mix up the values in here. Hang on a sec. I'd mix up the values in the foliage. And also I'd probably come in here. So I'd add some different, you know, I could probably just wet this whole thing down again and introduce maybe a little bit of a different value or different temperature of green or something, or a different mix of green. And another thing I'd do is I'd probably come in here, mix me a darker value and go, well, if my sun's over there, then I can start to put just a few shadow values down in here and start to separate a few of these things. I don't want to do it everywhere and I want to overdo it, but just to start to break up the shapes, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And then again, I'm going to go, I probably push my little core right here a little bit. And then up to here, it's starting to get a little flat. So up here I might, and then another thing I can do is I go, you know, is there a sky, a blue sky like that's over Elizabeth right now, something like that? Because then I've got an excuse to bounce all this, gosh darn it, hang on, to bounce light in here. And I'll adjust, yeah, I'll just adjust it now. Let's see what it looks like. It's probably a little much. I think I want a little more value in it. I kind of want that a little bit purer. Probably still need a little more value. And I could probably introduce a little bit of that sky sort of bouncing off the top of his head. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And you see how we're starting to make him just a little more interesting looking by doing all this stuff?
Yeah. It does look a bit more interesting than what I did.
I'd probably define a few things here. This could probably get a little cast shadow. So what I'm trying to do, I'd probably put a little thing over that, like his nostril sort of tucked under there. Maybe a little bit of this warmth right there. I might go in here and just get a little bit of definition there. You know, maybe on the hands a little bit of information. What I'm doing is what we're doing here. You're creating a big shape, and we talked about this. You go sort of primary shape, secondary shape, tertiary shape. But once I put down a big shape, then I'm looking at how can I form this and give it some form, and how can I break the shape up where it starts to become a little more interesting. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Because the areas that like you don't really model at all, or you don't put enough information, you know, break up the information sufficiently, they'll tend to go really flat. Now, another thing you could do with this guy, let's go to a different layer. Hang on. And I think I'd probably do this with him is I would go, at this point, I'd probably just go to a darker value because that'd be easy. And I'd probably put some kind of pattern on him. It could be a really interesting pattern. I'm just going to make a little whatever pattern. Then I could have certain things wrap over a little bit, the pattern. That also shows form. Starts to flatten out as it goes. I could show part of it here, part of it here. This can get a little darker down there. I don't like that. you know, so a little pattern on them would probably help a little bit. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Then I'm going to reshape this a little. You know, because that you could just mix up a little darker version and sort of, you know, just come up with some little pattern and it just kind of helps him. This guy needs to get fleshed out. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna work on that soon.
Yeah. And you're going to have to get some, you know, a few folds in there, just a few, because otherwise that whole character is just going to go totally flat. Because right now it's an outline. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And it's sort of, I'll talk about this a little more later, but it's sort of the reason I tend to, and it's not unique to me, obviously. When I'm doing a drawing or even a painting, like if I'm working on a canvas or whatever, you know, I'll go in with that acrylic to draw out the whatever on the canvas. And then I tend to just start adding a lot of value to it just because I just naturally do. But the value of that is that when I go to start painting, I've got a totally, the whole value system is already there. And then when I start washing over it, it assumes the whole value thing, and my painting goes much faster because it's sort of, I've already locked all that together. Does that make sense? And then I'm just glazing. I'm
Yeah.
basically glazing over it and then building up to opacity, which we're going to talk about with the acrylic stuff. Okay. But it's sort
Okay.
of, and then the other thing here, the light's there. There could probably be a little shadow there, right?
Yeah.
Probably a little
I didn't
darker.
add it in until I
So
didn't
let's,
add it in because I was done with the ground though. But yeah, I'm planning to do that.
I'm going to go to, I'm going to switch this because I don't like it. I don't like it a deeper value of the brown. There
Mm.
it is. I'm going to switch this. Let me see if I can switch it. Purple, like, hang on. Somebody just sent me something. It's like, anyway. Okay, so a lot of times what's really nice to use to break up sort of a, that's got a sort of a yellowish, orangish quality to it, is a little bit of violet over it, right? And okay, and here's where it gets interesting to me. Like when I'm doing these demos in class, sometimes people go, "Were you using almost pure, or maybe even pure purple, dioxazine purple, right?" And I really dilute it down. And I go, why am I using it pure when I'm always, because they always go, you're telling us not to just use pure color. Well, in this case, I'm glazing over its complement basically. So it's going to automatically knock it down. But if I dilute that, or if I knock down the saturation of that yellow or that purple when I put it over it, then when I put it over the color, it's just going to go really dull. And I want to keep a little bit of the vibrancy in it, but the painting underneath it is still going to knock it down. So it lives pretty nice on it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm using the stained quality glass of it, or stained glass quality of it, to build things, right? And the reason I'm kind of doing that is partly is I'm like, I want to keep some of the vibrancy of this color. And if I just do a pure wash over, very diluted, it's going to still keep some of the purity of the color, but it's still going to knock it down a little bit. And I do that a lot with purples over like warms, like this kind of ground plane. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And now I'm
Yes.
going to go, so I wouldn't want it that strong. So basically, in the real world, it would dull down a little bit naturally. Hang on. Trying to find something close. A little more like that, probably. Probably want it a little darker. could probably, it's too saturated now when I go darker, so I'm going to desaturate it a little bit. So you get the point, right?
Yes, I do.
This foreground element, is that's a tree, right?
Yeah, it is.
So when you're doing things like this, another thing that's going to help, this could probably go darker. Not that it always does, but in this case, it probably would. I probably would have pulled out some leaves or something in the foreground. I know I'm using a weird color, but oops, I'm on the wrong layer. Hang on. Because then I got an opportunity to pull these, maybe some, and I don't want to use the same green everywhere. And maybe I could mask some leaves here and get a nice overhang in front of this background stuff. Does that make sense? See, look how just that little bit of pass on it, how it's starting to bring it all up. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
And the reason I always point that out is because I'm not doing that much to them to elevate them. It's just experience, really, and knowing this medium or what, or just knowing picture making. Okay, so it's not like everything is this big. Hang on, let's do one more thing. I'm going to switch this back to normal for a minute, because if there's a shadow value there, then I have to keep where's this? I'm just going to futz this. Where's his shadow? And that's a horrible shadow, but it's fun. What does it do that? I love Wacom technology. I love how it doesn't work 90% of the time. It's really cool. Hang on. What's going on here? Sorry, it always throws windows to the other thing behind everything, and then I forget I got to go over and look at it. Okay, so let's go back to hard light. That's not it. I don't know why I lost the other guy, but I would put a little cast shadow, both following the same line. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And then if we just get some other color in here. I don't know why I lost my shadow. That's weird. In here, and I would have done this when I'm washing all this in here. That'll start to help it, because it's the same thing with color. I feel like you need a relief from all this green. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, some of this could bounce up in here and light it up. Now I'm always got to be thinking what the value of that, and this is why you kind of want to block everything in very quickly, because, or not quickly, but get the whole surface covered, because now I don't know the value of this person sitting here. And so if I start working into the background, I might actually be undermining my later washes there. So if I cover the whole surface, and get the whole surface covered, then I have an understanding of value-wise and color-wise what's going on in this whole thing, and I can start to make decisions based on that. Now, you have a color comp and a value comp, so you kind of know. So you can look at that and go, okay, the shirt on that character is this color, his hair. Now, if this character's hair is blonde, that's going to be kind of a problem, because it's going to sort of want to blend into all these yellows and greens, right? Now, I might have to go in and go, I'm going to put a little bit of, I can bounce some of this warmth into here. But like, let's say his hair was blonde. That's not enough. But I might then go, well, maybe I should come in here and find out how I can build some darks around his head a little bit, which is pretty easy to do. So that'll pop him a little bit from a value perspective. And it'll also it'll break up my colors a little bit.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I was going more for like brown hair, but
Okay,
yeah,
that's
that
fine.
could work too.
Well, it
Yeah.
doesn't matter, dark or light. I got to be thinking about whether that's going to be dark, and then maybe I leave that back behind him a little lighter. I'm always thinking about silhouetting things. Does that make sense?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. All right. Oh, and then one other thing back here. I'd probably get a less value of this. Or maybe I'd even, let's see if we can do it like this. I'd put a tree back there. Maybe another one. Maybe a little bit of foliage back there. You don't want it to just be blank back there. And I want to break up this.
Yeah.
I want to break up this uniformity of these trees. You know, and I might do that. Maybe one goes behind. If you notice, I throw some at diagonals. Maybe this is a fatter one. It's got to go a little darker. Maybe I've got a fatter one back here. Then, again, maybe there's some foliage here. Then I can go, this is just what I always start to think about. Then I go, okay, so maybe back here, the sun's back here maybe. I'm going to put a little hint of sunlight kind of coming through those trees. Because what's really going on back there in a forest or something is there's sort of a layer in the furthest part of it that's really just texture. Okay, just a big bunch of texture. Then the next layer sort of comes in, you get a little bit of definition on things. Then the one comes closer. So I tend to go in and just scrub everything in the background, kind of knowing that I just want a lot of noise back there, visual noise. And then I start building toward, moving forward. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, I get it.
And then, I soften this up a little bit. And then I start to get a little bit of like sunlight bouncing around back there. See how much difference that makes?
Yeah, it does. It really does.
It is. And it's really simple stuff, right? You just have to know it. And that's why I always say it's a mechanics class, because I don't expect everybody to get it, right away. Hopefully you guys will start getting it. Okay, so that added a lot of depth to the background, right?
It did.
Okay, so, and then, you got your sun coming up here from the upper left. So I have an excuse to go some darks in here, mix up my, temperatures and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, sometimes I don't put up the video and we're just having a discussion. We're doing a lot of correction today, so I will put this one up. Okay.
Okay.
I don't
Yeah.
expect you to remember everything I'm saying.
Yeah,
Sometimes
it's okay.
Huh?
Thank you. It's okay. Thank you.
Okay. But I think if there's enough discussion around technique, then we should put it up.
It still needs lots of work.
Yeah, that's fine. It
Hmm?
looks like a pretty good leap though to me. Yeah,
Yeah,
that looks like a really big leap to me.
thanks.
Um,
I wasn't sure,
go ahead.
like with his feathers.
I think you're starting to do exactly right. You're starting to build this nice, warm, cool thing here. This is really, this in here, this mark making in here, more of that.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
I didn't know how, I didn't really know, I just threw paint on there. I didn't, because I don't want it to end up looking like a blue rooster, like, I
No,
don't know.
that's why you usually are going to really mute those colors.
And
Which this is pretty muted, which is nice.
okay. I messed up with I just feel like there's way too much green. Made a few mistakes and tried to cover it up, and it just,
Okay, but you're accomplishing what I'm looking for. It feels like there's now a level of leveling up. Does that make sense?
Mhm. And then I tried to do on the bricks below his feet, I tried to do the salt technique.
Yeah, I think the bricks look pretty cool.
The first time I did the technique, it didn't seem to, it was too light. It didn't show, you know. So I tried to do it again and drop darker on it. But I was just playing, you know. It was
You
fun.
have to play. You have to play with that stuff, and you also have to look at like with these techniques. Like one of the main things with like salt technique, plastic wrap technique, those kind of things. Even using the sea sponges, like we talked about, right, for texture. All those things have to be sort of integrated into the and like I didn't know you use salt there. That to me is how you use it. Like what I want to do is when I see these things, I don't really want to know, oh, there's the salt technique. Oh, there's you know, it's the same thing as like Photoshop where it's like, oh, there's the blah 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 filter, there's the blah 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 filter, there's the blah, and that's all I see.
Mhm.
So when you integrate it into your work in the correct way, you don't really notice it. It's just like, wow, that's really cool texture in there. And sometimes you're piling a couple of those ideas onto each other where you're going, hey, I'm gonna do a little salt, then I'm gonna hit it a little bit with the sea spongy idea or whatever. And they start to intermingle and start to create a really nice, like one of the things that, you know, you'll notice when you deep dive into all these things with technique is you go, 90% of the time you go, when you dig into somebody's technique or something, you go, that's not at all how I thought they did that. I thought they were going in and like painting that. And that's where everybody's brain goes sideways. Cause I remember I did that too, where I'm looking at something and maybe I'm trying to figure out the technique and I'm sitting there painting every shape. And it's like, they didn't paint every shape. They did a wash, then they did this and they threw some of this in here and they did this. Then they built up to it and then they popped a few highlights and all those things add up to looking very complicated. But they rarely are unless you're just doing even a glazed oil painting. They're glazing that up, probably like I just described over a full value drawing, and or underpainting, and it's you build this up into this thing that looks like you know that just looks very quote unquote detailed. It's like it's not really. It's just this process of layering all these shapes on each other, and then all of a sudden they kind of add up to something. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like I'm playing around. I just said I'm playing around with my sketchbook, and every now and then I'll just capture a little video of it. I'll put that together for next week because that's going to sort of speak to what we're going to start talking about with mixed media. Okay, it's just going to be a short little thing, but I think it'll help if I walk you through it. I think it'll help you understand that type of process. Okay.
Okay.
Let the stupid thing on. Hang on.
I think Tristan fell asleep.
Say it again.
What is it? It looked like someone was asleep on the screen.
This mark making right here, that's a big breakthrough right there to me.
Thanks.
Because it's okay. So why do I think that?
Why do you think that? because it's showing the warms and cools.
That's part of it. It's also showing a subtlety of warms and cools. Okay. This is a much more sophisticated level of, especially the cools, of color mixing. Does that make sense? Okay. That's a nice sort of slate bluey cool. Okay. Like a lot of times you tell people this and they just go get blue out of the tube and they throw it on there. It's like, that doesn't look like a shadow value. Okay. The other level up to me is the mark making. That feels like brushwork. Okay. And it's also feels descriptive of the feathers and stuff without being overly descriptive. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
That to me is what we're going for. Like when you really want to get into where I think people get derailed on this kind of stuff is they go, oh, I got to go in and paint every feather. And it's like, no, that's always going to look amateurish. You know what I mean? You got to get loose with your brushwork, understand how it follows the form, sort of get an overview of, you know, how it looks, and then go, how can I simplify that, reduce that? And then, you know, as you're simplifying it and reducing it, then as you build it up, you might go, okay, I can add a couple here and show a little more, a couple of pops, and you're done, right? Because this stuff we're talking about in relation to illustration and everything, to be honest with you, all the stuff we're going over in here, in my opinion, is what they should also be covering, or they should in some way be covering it in basic painting and things like that. Because your basic paint handling, mark making, temperature, all those things have to roll into one to make a decent image, right? It's a lot of things to juggle. I always say, look, with drawing, I'm basically drawing, or even a one, black and white painting or something. I'm juggling, I'm just throwing one ball in the air, right? Then you start adding value, you start adding, temperature, color, and now you're juggling all this stuff. And that's where I think, as we're moving into learning this stuff, that's where it gets tricky. Is you're going, I got to convey this value information now into color information, and it's not easy to do. And I think hitting mark making is that's a huge thing to me, because without good mark making, without good brush work, this falls under brush work. Without those things, you're just never going to have a very sophisticated looking image. Does that make sense? Now, on your comment on green, and by the way, there's an open study space. You guys know this on campus? So what I'm going to do, if that's an open study space, if there's some point where, like, if you want me to sit down with you on this, I have to see what the rules are. I can drive down to Fullerton and meet me at I think it's in the cafeteria, and we could just go over this real quick in person. Okay. So if there's a few of you that want to do that, that's totally fine. I'll drive down there and we'll set up a day. And then I could kind of go in there, because sometimes it's really nice just to, I so miss being able to go, hey man, throw a wash here. And, it's so much fun to me. Okay. You can do it digitally, but it's really fun to do it in person. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And if they're saying that's an open study space, I'm going to get my vaccine on Tuesday. And then you have to do 2, which sucks. Okay, so let's look at some. Okay, so all this green, I think the reason you think there's too much green is because there's too much of the same green. So one
And
thing,
I don't like that I didn't mean for on the left side, I didn't mean for that tree to get so tall. And
This
now
one
it's
here?
like a weird mountain. Yeah. And
What
then
I'd
I
say
tried to,
what I'd say here is you're starting to a little bit repeat, at least they're different heights.
Mhm.
But like
and the
here,
see,
go
it
ahead.
looks like a pyramid.
This one here.
Yeah.
Yeah, but here's my point. You're seeing those things now. Okay. This thing, unless somebody's a super advanced student, then I'll go, hey, do a portfolio piece, right? This is designed, in my opinion, for you to start learning this stuff and start seeing this stuff and hopefully having some breakthroughs in there, which you are, and starting to hopefully understand technique and understanding the media itself. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Which feels like you are starting to do that. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
You should be pretty proud of this. It looks like a pretty big leap to me.
Thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
So let's look here. Okay, so yeah, to your point, let me get a new layer going. And I wouldn't worry about fixing this. What I'm more concerned with is that you're actually seeing the problem there or whatever. Maybe I'd put a sky hole in here. I just go in and break that up. Now, the other thing I would do is maybe see if I can cool this off a little. Go a little cooler. Let's just try this. This won't work initially, but I think I can make it work. There's a couple different ways I can do this. And I'm using this weird blue because I can go over it and change it. Couldn't do that in real life. Actually, let's do it this way. I think it's a better way to do it. that to me, oh boy, hang on. Yeah, like this. Get rid of that. Okay, so let's just take this. Be easier if I just tear it up. And I'm going to go. Well, a little lighter in value. Does that make sense?
Mhm. So what do you call it when you made it more like a blue green?
And what I'm trying to do there is just get a little bit of atmosphere going on. Is that what you're asking me?
Well, I didn't know if there was like a
It's
term.
atmospheric perspective. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So it's just, you know, it's going back there. It's going to get lighter in value. Could get a little cooler. Usually gets a little cooler. Now there's exceptions to all these things, right? Always be looking for these things. These are rules of thumb that work pretty well, right?
Mhm.
See how that's starting to sit back now?
Mhm.
Because why? We desaturated it.
Mhm.
Man, this thing where it's always asking something. Hang on.
And on the right, I did not mean for the green to go up that high. I just messed up.
Over here.
Yeah.
And then here, I could probably do a little bit of the same thing. I'll just grab all this real sloppily. And by the way, sometimes I do this. I'll take a picture of it on my phone or whatever. I'll straighten it out, color correct it, which just takes a few minutes. And then I'll play around with it just to go, yeah, maybe I'll do this. Maybe I'll do that. And I can do that without having to worry about it. Right. Let's do the same thing here. Maybe these will go further back. Who knows? Let's see. Maybe I'll leave these because these feel a little closer. Maybe I'll leave those about there. And see how we're starting just very simply to sort of give it a little bit of depth.
Mhm.
Okay. Now, so in here, again, I might go, can I get something? You don't want to use the same green all the time. So maybe here, and I'm just going to make something up. Maybe there's a little more. Damn it. Maybe there's a little more. Warms in the foreground are always a nice thing. Maybe I'll hit it with a little bit of it. Start to give those a little bit of a different temperature. And another thing, you guys, one thing that I do, see how that pulled that forward a little bit?
Mhm.
Another thing I do is if I'm going like, what can I do with that plant? I'll just walk outside. There's plants everywhere. And I go, oh, there's a cool idea. I'll use that. Like I don't go down this big rabbit hole of like whatever. I just go, if I'm stuck, I just go walk outside and go, oh, there's a cool little effect. I'll do that. Or I'll look out the back window or whatever. And then maybe here I got a little pop. Oops. Of warmth in there. And these could just be little washes and things. And then I might even go, you got this, let me get a different brush. Come on. There we are. I might put a couple of these leaves just sort of coming up, and there goes my thing. Hang on, I gotta calibrate my pen. This never happens, by the way, when I'm not in a class. Okay, and it usually does it one more time, but we'll see. Okay. So see how breaking up that edge, how much that helps?
Yeah.
So let's go here. Oops. I don't want it to get uniform. That's always what I'm trying to avoid. And I might even go, okay, you got some, maybe I'll just go here and go, this might be the one place maybe where I might just use a little bit of, and I might just do this with a, like a old toothbrush and get some paint. And I always test it before I do this, get another handle, brush handle or something, just tap it and just scatter it a little bit. So I might come on here and just go, maybe there's some little blossoms in there. And then a lot of times I'll come in and go, okay, that's cool. Maybe I'll kind of break them up by hand with a little bit of some of this stuff or whatever. You know, and start to get a little bit of stuff. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And then this guy over here now. By the way, you can't, especially with this, you can't be worried about ruining it. Okay. Because I know where you're going along the whole way. So I'm grading on that. And this is a mechanics class. I'm not going like, you better have this amazing watercolor. I mean, come on, that skill set doesn't happen that fast. Sometimes it does, but it doesn't usually. What I'm grading on again is understanding of the material, hard work, blah, blah, blah. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So these leaves here are starting to be kind of nice in here. Then in here, here's another example where I might come in and grab a lavender, like a light wash. Let's see if I can make it work here. That's why I don't like the computer sometimes. I can mix this stuff so easily by hand. Computer, you're going to picking. I mean, there's other ways you can do it, but so let's go here. Let's put a layer over this. So this is something I would do with a really light little wash. And I go, if my light's up here to the upper right, upper left, then I could start to put some, again, this would be a pretty watered down diluted wash of purple. And I could start to sort of show a little bit of shadow values in these things using that little wash of violet in there. And it's complement. So that's why, see how that starts to pop it a little bit? And I would just do that as a diluted wash right over my yellow.
How do you know when to use purple or blue?
Okay, I'm using purple in this case because purple is a complement of, it's the complement of yellow. Okay, so it's going to sit over that really nicely, and it's going to cancel it really nicely. So I can go in with a really, because you don't want to do this with a heavy wash of purple, it won't work. You want to go in with a light wash of purple, and you just kind of knock it over that, let it dry and see how it looks, and then I go, okay, maybe it needs a little more. And building up color is really how you create. You're doing a couple of things. You're by going, letting that one dry a little bit and seeing how it looks, and going, now I want to put a little one over here. You're starting to build more shapes, which makes it more interesting. You're starting to build a more density of shapes. But also when you build up color, it's sort of usually tends to work a little better because you're creating also sort of depth, just in depth of color, depth of all the, just depth, right? Whereas everybody's trying to go in and go, trying to get this perfect color, and you can do that. That's fine. That's a different kind. That's alla prima, more or less, right? And I'd argue not that many people do it that way usually. Okay, you can, and it's fine. But building it up, it just tends to give it some depth and some life. Okay. So now, you know, we're also, what else are we accomplishing there? We're also accomplishing getting another color in there that's not, that's sort of popping out of there a little bit because we have a sea of yellow and green,
Mhm.
right? So now I go, okay, I want to get a little bit, maybe I'd put a couple of, you know, I'm on the wrong one here. You know, maybe I'd put a couple little lavender hits in here too. I don't know. Then this here, this one here, let's see if this works. Because this is pretty close to the house. And then he's got a bright, you know, he's really bright. So I really want to pop that. So maybe I'll come in here and darken up that a little bit because that's closer to the viewer. And also it's, see how it's popping him forward now?
Mhm.
He was popping pretty good anyway, but, and then again, maybe in here, so let's go back to here. Well, let me get this on another layer. So I'm going to want to build this up. And I'm going to go with, let's go with yours because you already started it. But I don't know. Let's try this. I'm going to take a little bit of this violet again. What I'm going to try and do here, and I'll knock it down. So a lot of times when I'm doing this digitally, I want you to understand, I know I'm going to knock it down or I'm going to adjust it. Does that make sense? So before I would have gone on here, I would have already done that, okay, in traditional media. Here, there's going to be a little separation there. So I want to show that because they sort of have this kind of cowl idea
Mhm.
or whatever that's called, like a turtleneck, right? And then it transitions into here. So sometimes this is like an elaborate color and then it transitions into the chest and the rest of the body, right?
Mhm.
So I'm going to try something here. Oops. Trying to get lay over it like it would in watercolor. Ooh, that's kind of cool too. So let's go. Okay, I'm going to do this. Oh, we're back to normal. Okay. Let's soften a few of these. What I like is you have some nice mix in the blues that you put in there, and this too. You got a nice mix of sort of hard and soft edges. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Was that intentional? Because that's really good if that's what you're doing.
I did like I would put a color. I tried to get variety because the gray color, the bluish gray, I really liked that color when I
I do
mixed
too.
it. And then I just added more water to, and then I did a lot of blotting.
A lot of the
Not a
what?
lot, but I like would brush it and then blot it.
Yeah. That all makes sense.
But I don't know how I made that color. But I really liked it when
I can
made
tell you how to make it again.
it. Okay.
Little burnt sienna and ultramarine blue. And then you let the blue live a little more.
Okay.
Now,
I was
another
doing
really
like
nice
blue
warm.
and red and then adding brown to
That's
try
the
to
same
get-
thing.
oh.
So you just created kind of a triad because
Okay.
what is, okay, so this is good discussion. You broke it into 3 colors
Oh,
like
but
a triad.
ultramarine would be more.
like a triad because what is ultramarine blue? Ultramarine blue is basically a purple. It's actually a warm cool, right? Or a warm blue, right? It's
Okay.
got red and some blue in it. Okay. And then the ultramarine or the burnt sienna is sort of a natural orange. So what did you just create? Same thing.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? You're canceling them out and you could totally do it that way. And sometimes you get a more complex mix that way, which is really nice. But what I want you to do is tear it apart and go, oh, it's basically blue, you know, it's dominating with blue. So when you put in that orange in there, it kills it. but then there's red in there that responds to the, you know, that's responding to the bit of yellow that's in there and the little bit of red that's in there. Like they're responding to each other and parts of them are canceling each other out. So you get a nice complex gray. Does that
Mhm.
make sense?
Yeah.
So I'm being really sloppy here. I'm going to push it more towards your blue too. There we go. That's a little better. Now that's too dark, but that's fine. So my point is, if I start building up and mine's way too saturated, yours looks better. If I start coming in here and he's going to start, you know, that value is going to start popping, right? Go with your blue, by the way, mine sucks. Let's try this one more time. That integrates a little better. And then at some point, I could come in here and you already got this going. This sometimes, and again, another kind of common mix, at least for me. Okay, so I'll go to ultramarine blue and burnt sienna for a nice, quick, cool gray, like a nice, cool gray. I can push it warm. I can let the burnt sienna live a little more. You know, I can add a little thing to it and nudge it a little bit. But what I tend to do is I go, now I want to warm here's my two go-tos for cool grays. That's the one I'm going to go to for my kind of cool muted blue gray, right?
Mhm.
The other one I'm going to go to is brilliant orange, which is just straight out of the tube. You know, it's a really brilliant, or you can mix a really nice bright orange. I now I let myself have the orange on there because I use it a lot. And then I mix that with cobalt blue and I get a really nice warm gray. Okay, so those are my two go-to mixes for those two things because I go to those two mixes a lot.
Mhm.
Okay, and you'll find, like, you might find out that triad that you just described, you might go, that's my go-to cool gray, and that's fine. Like you're gonna find, just like when you said, how do you know when you do this and you do that? It's like, well, a lot of it's just experience. I know I'm going to a cool shadow here. It's got a lot of warmth around it. It's got a lot of yellow around it. That cool purple lavendery thing is going to look really nice in there. Or it might just be, I'm looking at the atmosphere and I'm going, wow, that's pretty purpley or whatever, right? Again, sometimes I go outside and I just go try and get a cool idea for like some interesting shadow ideas or something. I just walk outside. You know what I mean? I think that's where people kind of go south, is that they start going on, you know, just overthinking it. It's like, just walk outside, because it's better than a photograph, because that's the real deal. You know, like right now there's still snow on the ground, and right now, like, I can look out my window right here and there's snow hitting the ground. It's really cool, right? But it's really gray. Now I probably let that live a little more cool because it's going to pop, because the sun hitting the snow is really warm. So it's really going to pop it, you know? So I'm interpreting nature and going, I'm going to make it a little more blue. And why is that shadow blue in the snow? Because the only light reflecting into it is the blue of the sky. Okay. And it just tends to sink into the shadows because the light is blasting out the lit parts, and you're getting that warm sunshine. So nature just gives you, yeah, here's a warm, cool. You know what I mean? Nature just hands it to you. Nature will hand you so much design stuff. It's crazy. You know what I mean? Like, you look at it and you go, God, every time I look over there, there's a perfectly composed, everywhere I look, nature just composes these perfect things, you know, and it's so mind blowing. There's a log on a hike sometimes I do up here, and I'll take a picture of it. And it's like, I think somebody cut the end of this thing off. It's a big giant, I don't remember how it all happened. I can't remember. It's just mind-blowingly cool looking. You know what I mean? Just, it's just such a beautiful design, you know? And I always go in on it and just kind of crop it. And it's just like, can't beat that. You know what I mean? Okay, so let's go here. Oh, let's do this. Now here's where it gets really fun, is to mix in these really beautiful warm, and this is okay. It's not great. That cobalt to give you a really nice warm gray, right? Cobalt and brilliant orange. So I might kind of start to come in here. So what I'm trying to do is like build this where I'm suggesting the edge of the feathers and things just enough. I don't need to overthink that or overdo it. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
You're doing I hope you're understanding this. That mark making is a big deal. Okay. That is one of the hardest things for me to convey to people is that idea. And when you guys start thinking about it, that means you're going to get better at it because now you're thinking about it and you're starting to put it into practice. Okay. So what you need to pull out of these things we're doing in this, any process in here is okay, I'm starting to get this. And then you got to go do another one. When we get done with this, what we run through these 3 major medias and maybe mixed media, you have to decide like which one of these resonates with me. You know what I mean? I really like watercolor. And, everybody doesn't have to think like I do. I have to like get out of my own head sometimes. Cause like when I was learning all this, I'm like, I want to be good at all of them. You know what I mean? I just want to be really good at painting and I don't care what kind of paint you give me. I'll know how to make a painting. So that's how I pursued it. I think most people they gravitate to a media and go, I really like this, and that's where they go down the rabbit hole on. And that's totally fine. You know what I mean? Actually, I'd say that's probably more common,
Mhm.
Okay, so let's loosen this guy up a little bit. And see how we're starting to sort of build a little bit of form in there?
Mhm.
And this another thing. It's a build up. Never start a painting and go thinking, I'm going to go to the end. It's a build. Teach yourself, out of this process, maybe you like this process. These are very standard sort of, in my opinion, ways of working, and then you'll vary it and stuff like that. But make sure you develop a process where you like the whole process. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Where you love the drawing part and then you love going into the early washes, then you love doing this and you love doing it. That's what I think you have to do, because otherwise you go in, and I think this is really common, you go in and go, I just want to get to the painting, and then as soon as you get in the painting, you go, I want to finish it, I want it to look all cool. And it's like, it ain't gonna work, because you're gonna keep trying to jump too far ahead, and you can't do that. You got to build it. Okay.
Mhm.
And maybe down here I'll get a little more. So I'll only build it so much. And then what the really fun part of this to me is, let me put a little more. Now, I'm not liking my brushwork, but I just want to get my point across. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I actually like your brushwork better than mine. Okay, and then a little more here. So now I'm just looking at it from a design perspective and going, I need a little, like maybe a little cast shadow under the, what's that thing called?
I don't remember.
So what we're trying to do is keep this guy where he feels fluffy,
Mhm.
And then at some point I'm going to come in here probably with a little bit of gouache in my mix, and I'll mix some a little bit of the warm in there. A lot of times what's really nice, and hopefully you're starting to see this, you get your palette starts to harmonize. Does that make sense? Where you start going, it almost, I don't know if you guys have experienced this yet, where you start just kind of throwing color down. You're like, why are all the colors working? Because your palette's harmonizing. Because you're not using too many colors. You've got a lot of good mixes in there that are your basis for your painting. And then you're sort of just going and going, oh, I just need to nudge that with a little more yellow and put a little orange in there. And then boom, you got your next color. And it's harmonizing because it's in the same family. It was built out of the same family, right?
Right.
And that's why you don't want to have a gigantic palette, like, and again, down the line, if you decide you like using a big crazy palette, and some people do, that's your business, right? I don't think for some people it's fine. Like I've seen people, they have insane palettes where they just go like a prismatic thing where they just go through the whole color spectrum, and they've got like 40 colors in there. That wouldn't work for me. You know what I mean? But then also when they're talking about their color mixing methodology, it's sort of really almost scientific. I don't want to be scientific. And now the way I'm making, and I was thinking about this yesterday, the way I make color decisions now is I don't even think about it that much anymore. I used to always sort of hyper analyze how I was thinking about color. And now I just go, dude, it's sitting in the back there. You've done years of it. Now just it's a language. Like stop worrying about it. You know what I mean? Because it's working. So don't worry about it. Right. Okay. And then I come in here. And I would just get some little hits of these nice little highs here and there. Yeah?
Yeah.
And then I can also come in here and go, I think I cool this down a little bit. Watch this. Ooh, that I didn't notice the stone on the fireplace. That's cool. Especially right there. Yeah? Right there, you got it right there. And then what I like too is it breaks up. It's not overly heavy-handed. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
It's the same idea. You want to like, you're clustering them, let them kind of break up. What people do is they go in and they try and paint every little, it's like, no, man, it's this loose washy thing. Then you build it up. Okay. So let's go back to this. No, that didn't work. Hang on. A little more blue in it. Yeah, that's good right there. Ooh, that's kind of nice right there. Look how if you just purple it up a little bit, it looks cool, right?
Mm.
But I want to go a little darker in value. Which I think I had here somewhere. Let's just say there for now. See how that turns the building?
Yeah.
And now I can go put a little of that over here.
So that's a purple wash.
That one's a purple wash. You could use, you know, this is another thing where you might be doing the, you know, you might take a little of that. I might do the purple wash just to mix it up a little bit. Or it could be a bluish knockdown wash.
Mhm.
Could be a variation of the knockdown wash you're doing on the bird, right? And then this here would get a little bit of it. That's kind of nice, that little warm thing. And then and you got a nice cast shadow there. Yeah, that's good. Maybe under here I'd get a little more cast shadow.
Yeah, I wasn't sure how the light would hit because I started to put like a shadow under there, but then it started to get muddy and I patted it off real quick because
Yeah.
I thought it was getting dirty looking, you know?
There's two things with watercolor that annoy me. One is everybody goes, oh God, watercolor is so unforgiving. Oh God, it's so hard to do. That's totally annoying to me. It's like, it's not unforgiving. Just have a rag in this hand and just damp
Yeah.
it out if it sucks. And then the other side of it is they go, some teacher at school did this. And somebody was making this big deal out of watercolor. And it was a big deal because it was a student piece and it was actually a really remarkable piece. I mean, not just for a student work, it was a really beautiful watercolor painting. And Phil was talking about, because Phil doesn't know how to do watercolor. And he's going, oh my God, it's so, you know, he was going, you know, that's so hard to do watercolor and it's really cool, which is cool. He was doing that. And then somebody else goes, it's not that hard. All you have to do is just scrub it out if it's wrong. And I turn to her and I go, you've never done much watercolor, have you? I go, because everybody says that who doesn't do watercolor. And yeah, there's things you can do, but 90% of the time, if you do that, like I would have loved to have gone, let's go in the room, let you show me that.
Mhm.
Let's see you scrub that down without destroying the surface of the paper.
Yeah.
Once you destroy the surface of the paper, this doesn't work anymore.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? So it's like, those are the two ends of the spectrum with it. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
One is, oh my God, it's so unforgiving. Well, I guess, you
Mhm.
know, but then we can also go in and tweak little fixes with adding a little gouache to our paint and kind of knock things out and reshape them a little bit. So there's a lot of,
Or people think it's so, you're not done yet. I'm like, no. Like,
what do you mean with your painting?
yeah, with any artwork. But
Oh,
like with this one, yeah, it's like,
Yeah,
oh, it takes time and I'm
no,
trying to learn and I don't want to make it
no. And you know
fun.
what? And I've been saying this in all my classes because I can totally tell I'm entering a different phase of what I'm doing and stuff.
Mhm.
Because now I'm teaching, and now it's like all that commercial stuff. It's like I don't want to do it anymore. I only want to do projects driven by me, and I'm figuring all this out, figuring out some big paintings I want to do, figuring out the children's book thing, figuring out all this stuff that now I can indulge myself in. And one of the main things I'm doing now that I'm starting to talk to students about, I love to paint and experiment in my sketchbook, right? So I love to have something I can keep going back to and doing that. And then I start another one, and, you know, and I love doing that, period. Now, the byproduct of that is I'm doing a lot of experimenting. I'm doing just a lot of different things. But the main thing I'm sort of focused on right now is I realized, like, over all these years, everything was about speed.
Mhm.
All right. And I'm tired of that. And it's sort of sunk into my thinking, my commercial thinking or whatever, where I started going, hey, I was really proud of how fast I was, you know, yeah, I could throw down a portrait in like a minute or whatever. Who cares? But I mean, that's good to have that for commercial work. But it's like, when was the last time you got into your sketchbook or whatever and just luxuriated in the process? Because I love the process. Okay. And that's what I'm focused on now. Now I'm sort of focused on like just working through a bunch of stuff in my sketchbook where I'm doing very finished work. And then going, you know, I might work on it for like my girlfriend will go, well, you've been working on that thing for a while. And I go, if you add up all the time I've worked on this, it's probably 3 hours. But what I'm doing is I'm savoring it, and I'm going, okay, that I don't know where to go from here. And then I look at it a couple hours later and I go, oh, I know what I can do. And I start painting it again. And by having that time to polish and get some distance from it, it's just so much fun. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And now I'm starting to go into much more finished out stuff, and it's going to all lead. I know where it's leading now, but I need to go through this process. So what I've been telling students is I go, you should actually, however you do this, I love to paint my sketchbook and all that kind of stuff. We're plein air paint and all that stuff. But I go, you should have something going on all the time that you can spend time on, work through, and sort of enjoy that process. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And not, you know, have it run alongside your school or whatever. And I know sometimes you don't have time for it because you got a lot of projects and stuff. But like when you do this, as soon as you do this and you start going, I think I'm getting this, then you need to do another one right away, because you don't want to, it's like, you don't want to lose what you're gaining momentum,
Mhm.
and you don't want to lose your momentum.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I have a sign for myself that I wrote in my workshop that says, slow down, enjoy yourself. Because it's always like, I gotta hurry and do this. I gotta hurry and do that.
You know what's really weird is I've just realized this about myself, where I'm like, I don't do that enough. One of
Yeah,
the
me
things I like
either.
about plein air painting is I go and I set up and I go, you're here for a couple hours, so just enjoy it. Like,
Mm.
forget about anything else you have to do.
Mm.
And like yesterday, I went down the hill for something, and then I'm like, oh, I got to do this, I got to do that. Now I got to get up. Now I got to drive back, and I got like, why are you always in this like mode of
I'm
like,
the
I got to do
same
this, I got to
way.
do that, huh?
I'm the same way. That's why I put a sign up.
I think most people are that way, you know.
But this one, just the painting, I spent 5 hours on. That's a
That's not
lot.
bad.
No?
No, don't worry about that. Like all this stuff with all that stuff. Number one, if you're doing a finished illustration, you should put some time into it, especially traditional, right? You should be putting time into it. This isn't like dicking around. This is like, you know, you're doing a finished illustration, it's a painting or whatever. You're supposed to spend some time on it. Okay. Like, I don't know why it always annoys me, because I can run into people when I'm out sketching and stuff. And I swear to God, half of them that come up to me, most of the time they don't notice me, luckily, but half the time they come up to me, this is the first thing you do. Wow. How long did it take you to do that? And I feel like,
I know.
screw you, man. And I, sometimes I just want to go, what are you, my boss? And then I go, I don't know, it took 10 minutes. Oh my God, it took 10 minutes. I go, it's a bitch and drawing whether I took 10 minutes or 2 hours.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Yeah, just so what? I could do it fast because I had it, I did it in my career. The speed really happened because of, having to be fast. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay, so but look how much that's starting to pop. You see that?
Yeah. Hmm.
And then this guy, let's just do this real quick.
And then with my roses, I put down a wash, but then I think I went dark too fast. So then I went in with the lighter color and I know I wasn't doing it correct. I don't think that's the proper way to do it, but I don't know. I wasn't sure.
With the roses,
Yeah, with the rose bush.
the yellow roses.
Yes.
I think I would just, like I said, add a little cool shadow in there.
Okay.
I think that's going to help it a lot. I'll do one more thing here. Oh, two more things. Then we'll take lunch. And my lunch is another meeting.
Oh no.
This one's not bad, but and I'll be able to leave it because I'll just go, I got a class, I can't hang around. Never make a selection like this, by the way. But for this, it's fine. Okay, so let's go. I want to get some value on this guy. Oops. So I'm just going to generalize here. Let's see. Where'd that dark value go? Okay, so let's start there. See, if we get a little darker value on them, you're going to build those. Does that make sense? What I'm trying to do is just show you, you want to, he's going to get a nice bright or a nice darker value because, he is light. So it's not going to be like, this is what's nice about this is that there's this tendency, especially in entertainment design class. I think I've talked about this where they go almost black foreground thing, mid value gray, light value gray, and it creates atmosphere, but it also looks like a bunch of theater set flats. And also you can't always go that dark in value with everything in the foreground. It starts to be, that's why you see that stuff and you go, well, everybody's work from that class looks the same. And then as they go through classes, they keep using that formula. You see it all the time. And you're just like, okay, do you know any other color scheme? You don't understand lighting. You understand how to do this little trick in the computer.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so let's go. Now, another thing that I do a lot. Hey, that's weird. Oh, here's one. If I have like a knocked back red, sometimes if it's knocked down, I can go in with a purer red and start to have that read as the light hitting it.
Okay.
So
I just have, so I don't have like a red.
Get a red.
It's like a darker red. I don't know what
just get a I like to have a neutral red. Okay.
A what?
A neutral.
Okay.
Which means when I add white to it, it doesn't go orange. It doesn't go purple.
Oh, you add white?
If I'm using a little bit of gouache in here.
Oh.
I'm only going to do that here and there.
Mm.
Just like I said, like those bright leaves on his chest right here, because you've already put down all this, stuff, you're going to need to, unless you're going to save the whites. I don't want to save all my whites all the time. I save as much as I can, but then I'll just go in and I'll just add a little bit of white gouache into my, let's say, yellow ochre or something like that to warm it up. And then I'll I'll opaque that out, and then I'll start hitting it. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Let's do this, and then I gotta go to this stupid thing. So, you know, I'll start, all I'm trying to do is show you here as I'm trying to get a little more value. Does that make sense?
Yes.
A little more darker value. So on and so forth. And I'm totally generalizing. I would not put an entire wash over it like that. But what I'm saying is you want to build up the value to a good, where it looks, you know, it's sitting there in the foreground, but then lose that thing of like, oh, it's got to be almost black in the foreground. No, it doesn't.
Okay.
And in this case, I like that you gave yourself, without probably knowing it, you gave yourself a challenge there, because he's got to have enough value where he sits in the foreground, but he's also white.
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay, let's go to lunch.
Okay.
Let's come back at 12:45, and then we'll finish this up. Now I'll go through the rest of them. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, you guys.
Thank you.
Back at 12. Oh shit! I gotta end. Okay, so I'm gonna close this meeting down because I have to go have this other meeting, and then I'll pop it back up at 12:45. Is that good?
Okay.
Or hopefully before that, but by 12:45.
Okay.
But we're not
All right.
done. I'm just.
I know.
Okay. All right, you guys. I'll see you at 12:45.
Okay.
See you then. Yep.
Finish this guy up. Okay, so I think we went through all these, right? Elizabeth,
Yes.
you have any questions?
No, I think we covered a lot.
Okay, good.
If I have questions, I'll let you.
Yep. You can just hit me again. So this is just one of those things where you got to manage light values and make sure it's got enough. And that purple's too much, so I'd probably knock that down a little bit. Anyway, I'm trying to emulate this through a computer. And then here, maybe, again, I might come in with a little bit of, maybe a little bit of gouache, you know, and I could probably, oops. I could probably hit here. Get a little of that. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, you should be stoked about that one because it's showing that you're moving forward.
Thank you.
I still get a buzz off that, man. If I do something, I think it's actually like, wow, that looks pretty good. I still get a buzz off it. Okay, Ebony sent me some weird thing that I don't understand. Ooh, this is looking pretty good. Where you at?
Hello.
What do you think?
So far, I'm kind of happy with it.
Now, is this gonna get into a more of a night scene?
A little bit? I just kind of wanted to set like the base colors because I didn't really know how to transition it completely. The only thing that I'm not totally sure of is the tentacle that's near the lamp, because if you remember from the value thing that I did, that's supposed to be kind of like a harsh shadow because of the lamp's light and how it's supposed to interact with like the rest of it.
Yeah. What you got to do though, you got to be thinking about this as you're building it, as you're blocking it in.
Mm-hmm.
You got to be thinking about the lighting and how you're handling it, correct?
Yeah.
Oh, hang on. I didn't get a, did I get a screen grab? Hang on. What's today?
Today's Friday, March 19th.
Oh, okay. So that's not today. So I'll get this one. And I put this up, is the final on the 22nd, whatever day that is. Wait, what's today?
19th.
All right, just asked that. Oh, 19th. Okay, so it's 22nd. So what is that, Sunday?
Yeah, about that. Wait, was that Sunday or Monday?
Yeah, well, whatever. It's the 22nd. Just get it in there before that. Like I said, you can always plus it, right?
Okay.
But so far, everybody looks like they're doing fine. Okay, so when you're blocking this whole thing in, you want to be thinking about that lighting because you don't want to have to go, oh, wait, I didn't I didn't block in this light value that's where all the light's going to be hitting. And then what people do is they go, oh, I'll just mix a bunch of gouache and go in there. And it's like, okay, now your paint's going to get all chalky because you're putting too much in there. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you want to save those, or you want to throw those in based on your color comp and make sure, like this wall is completely, I mean, this room right now looks like a day scene, right?
Looks like a what?
A day scene.
Yeah.
And this is a night scene, right?
It's supposed to be, yeah.
Yeah. So you got to think about that right from the beginning, because you're going to start washing in all your lights right from the beginning, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it's going to be more like a, oops. You know, somewhere more like, you know, a little less saturated. Great, I'm echoing, you know. A little less saturated, a little darker, because then that's the only way I'm going to be able to get some of this warm light over here. Oops, on the wrong layer. You know, and I'm going to build that. Like here, you're going to be getting some warm light in here. I'd be careful this light getting, I mean, it can come out into the light and get pretty saturated on the green, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just make sure that you're managing that. This right here is going to be pretty light. And then you're going to have, you know, a warmer hit in here. You know, maybe most of my lights are right in here, which I think is what you came up with before. That's also going to give us a focal point where your eyes are going to go, because that's a maximum contrast, right?
Mm-hmm.
And color and all that. So the walls probably won't be too hard. You can cool them down and darken them up, right?
Mm-hmm.
You might even be able to do a wash over the, and also you're going to get some, you're really going to get some shadows in here, because there's, you know, that's a bright light, which tends to throw some pretty hard shadows into things. Like here. You know, all that stuff is just helping the lights look lighter, right?
Yeah.
Okay, does that all make sense? And then here, again, this needs to have, I think, a pretty heavy duty glow down there. There's got to be a light source that's sort of emanating out of here. Make sense?
So far, yeah.
You got any question or you have any questions about it?
Yeah, actually. How would I be able, because like this is like how the light reacts to like the objects in the room. That I can get and like the grasp on how to do, but how would how would I be able to do that from like the lamp? Because it's just like the slightest bit dim. It's like a nightlight setting, I guess.
You mean how you going to light up the lamp?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay, well, you got it behind this thing, which is fine. I might have shown it a little. This is also, it's a lamp. So this is going to start, it's going to glow. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And I probably would do this. I might put, okay, so the lamp itself, I can kind of reduce because the shade is going to sort of reduce it a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, another thing I'd probably do, so now we're starting to read it that it's a lamp, correct?
Yeah.
So that's answering that question, correct?
Correct.
Huh?
Yes.
Okay. Now, the other thing I might do, and I probably would do, I have to see how it looks. Put it on different layers so I can adjust it. I'd probably get a little of that going up the wall, not that hard. So let's reduce it down. You know how it'll throw that cone on the wall?
Yeah, I see it.
Huh?
I see it.
And then I might go, even though the bulb is probably a little lower, I like to give it a little pinpoint of light. I might just kind of do that. And now we're just starting to get a lot of lighting drama. Yeah?
Yeah.
Does that answer that?
That answers that.
Okay, good. All right, go.
Thank you.
Where's Robert? Is he here? Oh, there he is.
Yep, I'm here.
Now be careful with these shadows. They're getting like really dark. And I think what I would do is put it dark and then let it kind of fade off.
Mhm.
Like you don't want it to just go whoop, boom and drop, right? Now sometimes they can if they're getting, if it's a hard shadow, but it's laying this way and it starts moving, if it's a long shadow, it starts moving away from the source, it'll soften up as it goes out. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
I still say this tree should get darker in the foreground.
yeah.
And then be careful. So here's a good example of this, where you're going from this to a really dark value, where that value is not going to be that dark. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You always got to be careful when you're going from a light value or even a mid to going almost to black. It's like, no, it has to lay in there just right. Okay. And that's always a tricky thing. Everybody usually struggles with value. Okay. When they're starting out and stuff and forever. Like I'm always thinking about it all the time. And then be careful with how saturated this color down here is. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Did you change the moon? It seems like it's better this time. Or is that
Yeah,
how?
I did.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I like the glow around it a little more now. All right, you have any questions on it?
Besides those ones, I don't think so.
Okay. All right, so go, finish. Okay, let's go over this acrylic thing, you guys. So everybody knows we're getting this thing in there by the 22nd, right? It's
Yes.
under assignments. So what we're going to do next, I want to do a cityscape in acrylic. That's the drawing that I'll give you, okay? And that's the one I did the demo on YouTube. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yes.
And what I'm going to start doing on Friday, I'm going to put up the video on it so you can just start kind of getting a handle on it. What you'll need for this is illustration board. I would just get a piece of 16 by 20 inch cold press illustration board. Don't get the super flimsy stuff. Get something with a little bit of weight to it, like the normal. Just don't get the ones that are really, really flimsy. They sell it usually standard. 16 by 20 is a standard size. I would just get that. That's fine. And then we're going to do a different transfer process, which I'm also going to put up after class when I put up this video and all that, which is going to be a wet mount process. It's an acrylic wet mount process, which means you're not going to have to draw it again, which is actually really nice. So this is a different transfer method. And what I like about it is if I do a drawing or something, again, and I get the drawing where I like it, maybe it's a very finished drawing, I can scan that and then print it out, and I can mount that down onto my board, and I can just start painting right over it. Okay. It's also a nice insurance policy because if I screw it up, I don't have to redraw it again to start painting it again. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's a really good process to know. Now, and I'll get into this more on Friday and also in the video, I talk about it. You're not going, I think the mistake that most people make with acrylic is they go in and they go opaque too fast. Okay. And then the other thing with acrylic, it'll start to build up a lot of surface texture, which is fine later in the painting. It's not fine early on. It's going to sort of not leave you anywhere to go. And you're going to start to end up with a lot of flat opaque color. Okay. You're going to wash it up. And I'll talk about this again more on Friday. Plus you're just going to start seeing the video. I don't go into this with like fat paint, fat meaning opaque. I go into that later. Okay. Does that make sense? We're building up. So what happens now, what we're doing with watercolor is you're sort of starting with your lightest values so you can build the darks around it and keep those lights. It's the opposite more or less with opaque media, acrylic, gouache, oil. Your lightest lights are your thickest paint. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And then we'll get into all the stuff that's in here, the clouds and all that kind of stuff. But really what you're doing here is you're shaping out boxes, which I'll do a little demo on Friday. And then you're just building surface detail on these things. Yeah.
Yes.
What else? I'll put up again, my palette again. If you already have watercolor, or I'm hoping you already have acrylic paint from some other class, do not buy more paint. Does that make sense? I like to control the palette, but I also don't want you going out and spending a bunch of money if you already have it. Okay, so another thing I've been using, okay, so acrylic, one of the complaints used to be with acrylic is that it dried so fast. It's funny because it was formulated to dry faster, but then by doing that, it dried so fast that people would complain about the edges. And I've talked a lot about paint edges, correct? Hard and soft edges, all that stuff, right? So it would dry so fast that you constantly got hard edges. What were you going to say, Elizabeth?
Nothing. I just noticed my microphone was on.
Oh, okay. But now they're starting to formulate, and the one I'm using now is Golden Open, and this is just for your knowledge. Golden Open, the reason they're called open is they stay open longer, which means they stay workable longer, which just means basically they stay wet longer. And what I can do now, much easier, is that I've got a little bit of time to go in and go, oh, I'm going to soften that edge. Or maybe I'm going to I got two colors coming together. Maybe I'm going to go get a clean brush and just swipe between them and make a nice soft edge and so on and so forth. I have more time to work with them, okay? If you're using like Liquitex, and Liquitex makes really good product, but they haven't really reformulated their paint in a long time. Okay. Now, for the wet mount thing, you're going to need matte medium. Okay. Liquitex matte medium. I've tried other ones. I don't like any of the other ones. They're too gummy and they just don't work that well. And you can get little jars of it, like about that big at Blick. Okay. Just get the smallest one because it'll actually last you quite a while. That's all you need for the wet mount process. And the other thing that I try and do when we print these out, sometimes like if you have a small printer, well, everybody does usually. If you have a printer that prints 8.5 by 11, I'll print it out. You know, I'll set it up in the computer where I can just print 2. And then I can, you know, what I do is then I overlap the images. I put them up on a window or something. I line them up. I put a little piece of tape there. Then I take a ruler and I go right down the center of it. And then I got a perfect edge. And then I flip it over. I just hit it with a little bit of Scotch tape. And then that's what I wet mount down. That way I can go to a bigger size. Does that make sense? Now, here's the other thing. Try not to use, like I have the paper, this paper. Where is it? And you don't have to use this brand. Can you guys see that up there? That's Hammer Mill paper right there. I like to draw on that. And but it's actually a printer paper, okay? And I think it's 32 pound, which isn't super heavy. It's heavy enough that because what's gonna happen here is when you wet mount it down, you're gonna soak that paper pretty good with matte medium, okay? If you're using really crappy printer paper, that stuff that's almost like newsprint, it can tend to disintegrate. Okay. So really you just need to level up to a decent type of paper. That's it. Okay. It doesn't have to be like Bristol board, but you want it to have a little bit of weight to it. Does that make sense? And we don't want to go letter size. We want to go bigger. And again, we're going to still want to have that 1-inch border around it. We're going to tape it off. You know, we're going to tape it off. I think all you're going to need, you can use the same brushes that you're using for watercolor. Actually, for everything in this class, you can use the same brushes. In this class, basically, we're using a bunch of soft brushes, right? Soft hair brushes, as opposed to bristle brushes. Okay. Okay, so matte medium. That's the only thing I think you really have to get, other than acrylic. We're not going to use any mediums with our paint. There's just something with mediums with acrylic to me, and I've talked to other people and they say the same thing. I don't like mixing the mediums into my paint with this stuff. I don't know why. It just doesn't really work for me. It does weird stuff to the paint. Like sometimes if you want a weird effect like that, it's fine, but I don't really like it. Paint, brushes. Okay, and my palette is the same across any paint I use, okay? Because all the pigments, when you use, whether it's acrylic, gouache, or watercolor, they're all the same pigment. The only thing that changes is the binder. Does that make sense? It's either gum arabic for watercolor, it's polymer for acrylic, and it's probably the same gum arabic for gouache, I think, but they add like a chalk to it or whatever to opaque it out. And the one, again, I think it's probably better if you haven't done this before to just go the apples to apples route. Okay, because what I had last term was maybe 2 people that were like, well, I want to do your own thing. And I'm like, that's fine if you have a little bit of experience. And then their paintings were disasters. Okay, because they had the thing is, you got to kind of learn the fundamentals. Then you can kind of do your thing. Does that make sense? Because this is, again, it's about mechanics in this class. Okay. And what they did was they went in and they just took purple out of the tube and threw it all over one building, took alizarin crimson out of the tube, threw it all over another building, and took this one out of a tube and this one out of a tube. And I'm like, it was such a mess. Okay. From a color perspective. And it's just like, okay, hey, now I'm finding out that you don't know anything about color, this particular person. And then you're just throwing any color over any building. And I'm like, I don't even understand what this is trying. Have you ever seen a build or a city that looks like that? Because there isn't one. Do you know what I mean? And even if you were going to do a very colorful city, a pastel-y city or something, there could be an occasion for that. you'd have to plot that out a little bit. You can't just take any color and throw it in there, okay? But what I want to get to on, and I want to run through this project fairly quickly because we're not going to have to do all the thumbnailing and the ideation and the, if you're going to go apples to apples, you don't really need to do a value plan, even though I'll probably talk a little bit about it on Friday. So we could kind of get directly to the painting. Does that make sense? Any questions on that? That all makes sense?
So far, yeah.
Now, kind of the reason we're going to a cityscape thing is it's a completely different subject matter, but it's also just a good way to sort of start to understand a complex, fairly visually complex scene. Mostly, and the reason I didn't put people in this and the reason I didn't put cars in this is like, I don't need to add that layer of complexity to this. Does that make sense? Yeah. Because otherwise I don't need to do that. If you can get through this, you're going to be pretty good. Okay.
So this one's going to be a 16 by 20 with the 1-inch border, or what's
Yeah.
the final?
So
plan?
I'll come up with a size where we can just shrink it down so it's got enough edges and enough edge for your, so it's not gonna be huge. I think this one's this big. Does that give you a sense of scale? Right? So I don't have my ruler in here. And I think, and actually you can't see it here. I actually did put these two together, so that's probably in the video. So this has got a seam in the middle of it where I put it together, right? And then once you're painting over it, the seam gets lost anyway. You know what I mean? Like I have another one over here I'm just fiddling around with, this monster thing. And this thing's got a big seam in it, like in here somewhere, right? But you really can't see them because the paint starts getting opaque. The real trick with acrylic to me is not going opaque too fast. Okay, because again, it'll start making kind of an ugly texture, and then you're trying to paint over this texture. And now, if you go opaque too fast, what you've done is you've got nowhere to go, really. Okay. Now, again, you could go in and paint sort of alla prima and just like, but that's a different thing. And I think that's also requires more experience because you're going, okay, you got to put in the exact value, exact temperature, exact everything, boom, and put it down. And that takes experience, right? And I have a lot of experience. I just don't I work that way if I'm painting a model and they're right in front of me, I'll work much more kind of I'll go to opacity a little quicker. Okay. But that's like an alla prima thing. And it depends on what medium I'm using and all that kind of stuff. But if I'm using an opaque media, if I'm doing something from life like that, I'll go opaque a little quicker, but I'm going to still wash it up. Okay. I'm going to lay in that big flesh tone, and then I'm going to lay in the big wash of all the shadow values. And then I'll start going in and building my opacity up, and I'm going slow. I'm starting transparent, and then I'm building to just a little not transparent. So it's not totally opaque. It's not totally transparent. And then I build up from there to my opacity, and everywhere doesn't get opaque. Okay. So like what's nice to do with opaque media is leave your, and the reason I'm not saying this in regards to watercolor, because watercolor is transparent, is to leave your shadow values a little bit transparent. So they get a little light bouncing around in there. Okay. If you go super opaque with your shadow values, not that you don't ever do that, but the light doesn't really bounce around in there the same way. Cause like if I tone this board with a little bit of orange, which I usually do, I think I did on that, I'll have to check the video. I can build my values up over it and let a little of that orange pop through, and undercolors that I've washed in there pop through in the shadows, and they get a little bit of movement and a little bit of light. Does that make sense? Like usually when you see oil paintings, oil is deceptive. It looks like the whole painting's super opaque, but if you go look at an oil painting, yeah, a lot of parts of it are very opaque, but like in the shadows and stuff, a lot of times it's very transparent. Does that make sense? I think I prefer that you guys you go the apples to apples route on this. Okay. I don't care if you change some colors and things like that, but make sure that they're making sense. Does that make sense? And what I'm going to do on Friday is I'm just going to break this down a little even further than I do in the video. The video I'm going from start to finish, obviously. Okay. But on Friday, I want to go over a little bit of the basic fundamental thinking in it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I never want to just do, oh, here's the video, go watch it and go do it. I'm not doing that. I'm doing that because that's the only way I can show a process that long. And then I still want to talk about it in here. And I might even talk a little bit about some other things in there. I actually probably will talk about a couple different things in there. And I got to get everything set up in here. Questions? Everybody's good? Hey, look at this one. My other class is also doing a children's book. Look at that one. That's pretty nice, right? I think we had a lot of conversations around the color of a chalkboard. And I go, you got to nail that. And she totally nailed it. Right? I think there's some other ones in here. Hang on. This girl's never done one before, so I think that's pretty impressive. This one she's still working on, but it's going to be a good one. That's going to be a nice one. I think I have, no, maybe it is that one. Really good design. And by the way, Cynthia has a lot of experience. I don't know. I don't think she has that much with watercolor, but she has a lot of experience. I don't know. This one is pretty good. I think there's some things in it happening that are really nice. I think some of these kids, the way they're rendered and the way she's starting to get I like this kid here. So it's got some nice things going on in it. They had a text that they had to work to. Okay, so it's a little different than in here. Benton, you know, I don't think he's ever done watercolor before, and he struggled in the beginning, but now he's starting to develop it up where it looks a lot better. Okay. Because at first it was kind of, even he said, he goes, this is a mess. And he was a good example of somebody who's in entertainment design, and then you get him into illustration, you take all those things away, and all of a sudden you go, you don't have all those skills you think you have. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's kind of, you know, the fundamental, and I know I've said this, but the fundamental part of this equation is probably the most important part of it. Okay. So, because whatever people want to do, you're looking at that up there and it's like, you got to get the fundamentals down. Otherwise, you know, and it needs to be on paper and it needs to be traditional. That way you're going to understand it. Okay. Again, if you're just going into a digital environment and you're picking colors, you don't know anything about the color. Does that make sense? Because you're just picking colors. So that's why I look at the color and temperatures and I go, why are the temperatures so weird in here? Oh, because I picked red. Well, you picked a really cool red and that shouldn't be a cool red. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Whereas you're mixing color, you really start understanding it because you're mixing, that's as pure as it gets. Okay. Same thing with drawing, all that stuff. It's, you know, and then go into that environment. Okay. And also be careful, because what he was experiencing was like, you've been allowed to use all these tropes in your class and that was acceptable. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like these weren't good solutions. It's just in that entertainment environment, for whatever reason, a silly robot is acceptable. That's badly designed. That shouldn't be acceptable. That should be like, you're just drawing that based on all this stuff you like. Does that make sense? And you're not diving into, you know, how you do that and all that stuff. And that's all fundamental stuff. Trying to think if there's anything else you guys, I don't think you need anything else for this. Blake will have illustration board. Almost any art store will have illustration board. I think Michael's might even have it. I usually like to get Crescent. Make sure you're getting a cold press, not a hot press. Hot press is real slick, and we don't want that. And again, there's a really flimsy illustration board, and then there's sort of a standard one. It's a little heavier than that. That usually works pretty good. And then there's really thick ones. You don't have to get the super thick one. Just don't get the super thin one. It's got to have a little bit of body to it, so it doesn't just warp all of it. Even that one, it's like this one. It's a little bit See that? Now I could bend it this way and it'd probably be fine.
Yeah.
And this is fine. I mean, it doesn't matter. But this is the, I don't know, it's like an eighth of an inch thick or something. I love illustration board, by the way. If you're into plein air, acrylic's really a fun plein air medium because it dries so fast. And again, with the open, I can keep it workable long. Like when I'm going to go do, I think I told you, I'm going to go do that snow painting Sunday. Hopefully I'll get to go out and paint. It won't dry that fast at all in that environment. Okay. Now I was also out painting and it was probably 105 or something over the summer. And it was drying up pretty fast, but you know, that's just because it was over 100 degrees, right?
Mhm.
And I was like kind of in the desert or whatever. Okay, so no more questions?
Nope.
Okay, then I'm gonna let you guys go. Get these in there by the 22nd, whatever's under the assignments, yeah?
Okay.
And again, throughout the class, you can improve it if you want. You're probably going to get a decent grade anyway if you get in on time and you worked on it hard. And also throughout the class, if you want to keep working on it and you're just working on it for yourself, we can go back into that project. Or if you want to ask questions about it, it's not like the door's shut on it. Does that make sense? I'm not going to shut the door in any process, all right? Because you might have a lot of questions about it. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, you guys. I'll see you on Friday. If you need to get a hold of me, get a hold of me. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. See you on Friday.
Yeah, on Friday.
Have a nice day.
4 probably.
Okay.
All right.